Welcome to the April the 25th, 1989 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie. As we are researching the history of Grand Prairie, this is our history tape number 93. And we are very honored today to have a very special gentleman. This gentleman has had a role in the history of Grand Prairie, second to none historically. We're so pleased to welcome Mr. Marvin Vale to our set. Welcome, Mr. Vale. We're just glad to have you with us today, young man.
Good to be here. I appreciate that.
Mr. Vale, you have a long tenure here in Grand Prairie, Texas, but before we set the stage for that, we'd like for you to look out into your camera and give us the Vale genealogy. Tell us the name of your mother and father and anything you'd like to about your immediate family before you grew up. Would you do that for us right now? Okay.
My mother's maiden name was Emma Grace Fogelman. I believe her family came from Alabama to Texas. Now, I don't know when, sometime near the Civil War or before, my father's family came from Mississippi. His name was Alexander, or A.C. Vale. He was called Alexander Clifford Vale. And I don't know at all when that particular family came. I don't think I know about his brothers. They were adults when they were in the Kemp area where I was born. And my father was part Scotch-Irish, and my mother bragged that she was 132nd Indian. Now, I don't know about that really. My mother had there was 8 surviving children in her immediate family, meaning they lost 2 or 3 at birth. My grandfather, Fogelman, was a second grade graduate, made much money in the cattle business, the longhorn cattle, and often told of the wolves coming up to the cattle herds and so forth. And he was a very successful man, giving each child a 100-acre farm and a home as a wedding gift.
And all of this was in Kemp, Texas?
In Kemp, Texas, Kaufman County, really.
All right.
About 5 miles north of Kemp. Of course, now we're proud to be Kemp in that it's the entrance to Cedar Creek Lake on the north end of the lake. However, at the time I was growing up, it was a farming community and a farming town.
Is that what your dad did for a living then?
Yes, ma'am. Well, we children did the farming. My father sold Ford automobiles.
All right. In Kemp, Texas?
In Kemp, Texas.
All right.
And we, of course, went out of school in the summer. We were the main employees, though not really paid other than groceries and clothing, which is fine.
Now tell me this, if you were raised on the farm and did all of this good stuff, where did you go to school, Marvin?
Well, we moved into Kaufman during the winter months, and we attended Kaufman High School.
All right.
And at the very end of the school session, we immediately moved to our farm home and began farming.
All right.
And stayed quite busy during the summer. We didn't have time to get in foolishness, sir.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had, at that time, I had 3 brothers and 1 sister. One of my brothers is deceased. He was a war veteran and something of a casualty.
Would you name him?
His name was William W. Vale.
All right, and name your other brothers and sisters.
I'm the next in age, and the one younger than I is Nolan Vale, who's now in California.
All right.
James Vale, he lives in East Dallas. And then Dorothy Helen Elston lives in East Dallas. We all survived the other brother.
Would you like to tell us, in Kemp, Texas, going to school there and farming, did you graduate from high school at Kemp, Texas?
In Kaufman, Texas.
In Kaufman, Texas. At what year?
1937.
1937?
Yes, ma'am, and times were a bit hard then.
All right.
My first employment was at a drugstore working for 10 cents an hour.
All
Had
right.
to get a job. My next job, well, incidentally, I paid off some of my father's debts with that 10 cents an hour job. Had to walk or drive 5 miles to work then. My next job, I worked for the REA for 30 cents an hour. I had a cousin give me a little pull in getting that job. Several grown-ups with families were seeking the same job that I got. It was very hard work. And while on that job, one night, a friend of mine and one of our cousins and I were out triple dating, I suppose you'd call it, had taken the girls home, sitting in the car or driving home, listening to the radio the night that Hitler declared war on Great Britain or England. Well, we stayed at this friend's house listening to this particular war news really the remainder of the night. I was very tired and sleepy after working real hard all day on that REA job. But anyway, I was with them. Parents came out looking for us and didn't come up quite to where we were in the yard of this friend's home. And I got home, I think, around daybreak. Parents very upset, wondering what we had been doing. And I said, well, Mother, I'm really sorry. I told her where we were. She said, well, we came up the gravel road to the cotton gin. We just didn't turn up that other road to check if you were up there. I said, well, I'm sorry, but we were up there in that car listening to Hitler declare war on England. And I said, we stayed there until that particular program was finished. Well, we were 21 years of age at that time, and it had a lot of meaning to us, this particular thing. And both my parents heard my comment that that's what was why I was so late getting home. And they, with no comment at all, accepted, of course, the reason that
came about.
That came about, and I went to work. Funny thing was, I went to work the next day and looking at my cousin up top of those light poles and running gear up a rope to him. I'm telling you, before that day was over, all those poles going this way and that way, that I was I came home that night, and I was going to lie down a moment or two and rest before eating. I stayed right there all night. I was too tired to eat, too tired to undress, too tired to anything.
All right, now after you had your job at the REA, what was the next step in Marvin Vale's life? What happened to you next?
The next step was this real good friend and this cousin. The cousin had high blood pressure and was not acceptable to the service.
All right.
The friend, it's quite a story there.
All right.
He was most acceptable. He went to Texas A&M, became cadet colonel of all the students at A&M.
All right.
From there, upon graduation, commissioned a first lieutenant at Fort Bliss, El Paso, I believe.
And what was his name?
William A. or Bill Becker.
Bill Becker.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right. And what effect did he have on your life? Did you continue at REA, or did you go to school, or what was your next step?
My next step was, I went to junior college about a year immediately following this announcement of the war in Europe.
And where?
A little small junior college in Terrell, Texas.
All right.
I was on an athletic scholarship. That was one place I could get an athletic scholarship.
All right.
And I took advantage of it, and I believe I got off 21 hours of college work. And again, I say times were hard. I owed them some money. I couldn't pay them. At the end of that year, I could no longer continue schooling. The draft, I was one of the people who volunteered to help people sign up for the draft on October the 16th, 1940, there in Kemp.
All right.
Of all of these farmers with families that came in to register I'm thinking of myself. Here I am single, 21, no dependents, no exemptions, no nothing to keep me from serving. They have their business of farming is maybe in their favor or whatever. That I will be in the first call. Realizing that, and this cousin that had the high blood pressure, we both thought we would be and volunteered. I did not want to be in the walking army. I said, I want to be in the Air Corps.
All right.
So I came to Dallas and I volunteered into the Air Corps December the 2nd, 1940. I was accepted and shipped direct from there to Marksdale Field, Louisiana. I'll hasten this story if it would help. It ends up, I go through an armament bombing gunnery school in Denver, Colorado, and eventually end up in Puerto Rico. While loading practice bombs there, getting ready, we were getting be schooled and getting ready to ship out to England.
All right.
This is just prior to the outbreak of a U.S. entry into the combat. We all had to go through a rather severe physical, and I had a history of, and one correction of a physical defect, namely a hernia. Mm-hmm. And that this down position of, squatting down position of loading those bombs up in the racks of the bombers that we did every day, aggravated and brought that back again. So I was turned down from being in the group that went to England. The doctor there gave me, he said, son, you have one of three choices. You may have an operation here, you may have an operation in the States, or you are eligible for a medical discharge. I said, sure, I'm going to take the medical discharge and continue my life as was. He said,
all right. Following your medical discharge then, how old were you at that time, Marvin?
22.
You were 22?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, now we're going to leave you at 22 years old with a medical discharge. We're going to just sort of sever that for a minute. Now we have Marvin Vale, 22 years old, but we need to bring into this your wonderful wife that you're going to meet a little later on, but we want to get her genealogy in here before we go on a little farther with your story, with your permission.
All right.
All right, so let's stop right now and tell about Mary Kate Vale. That was a what before you married her?
Her name was Mary Kate Blythe at that time.
Blythe, B-L-Y-T-H-E?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, give us her mother and father's name first of all.
Her mother's name was Gladys Towson Blythe.
All right.
And they lived 5 miles, or her family lived, and her family lived 5 miles south of him. Her father's name was Felix Blythe.
All right. What did he do for
He was a farmer, a very successful farmer.
All right.
And they had the 2 girls.
Name them.
Mary Kate was the younger of the girls.
All right, and her sister?
sister's name was Johnny Mae Williams. He is now, who lives now at present in Kemp. She's a widow.
All right.
And has lived there all of her life.
Where did
I
Mary
met
Kate?
her. Mary Kate's rather funny.
All right, tell us how you
My
met her.
father, I don't know whether we've mentioned this before or not, as I say, we, the kids, were the farmers, and he was the automobile salesman.
Yes, you mentioned that.
And he had sold to Mary Kate's father, 2 or 3 automobiles.
All right.
And Mary Kate, would drive by this place of business. They also had a gas pump station.
All right.
You know, this is the kind that old tank pumps up, and you see the gas level in
The old gas pump.
the old gas pump.
All right.
Anyway, she quite often stopped there and traded, bought gasoline, as a matter of fact. And I'll never forget, I don't think she will either, she might, but probably would still admit, the one time that I recall real specifically, I winked at her just before she left. Mm-hmm. I guess that's the one thing that got us off on the right track.
All right.
There was maybe 2 or 3 years later before I had the first date with her. But I guess that was the icebreaker.
That was, and in what year were you two married?
We married in 1943. I believe.
1943. Now that we have her through school and have you through school, and you're 22 years old and you're down in Puerto Rico, how are we going to get you back from Puerto Rico? Did you come on back then to
I
Kent?
came back by way of a cattle boat.
All right.
It takes only 7 seconds to sink if a Japanese sub hit.
All right. Where did you come back to?
To New York, the old
To New
DNR
York.
in New York. There I was paid by last monies from Uncle Sam, and they told me I was on my own. Of course, they covered a bus transportation to Dallas.
All right. You got to Dallas.
Got to Dallas and had to be picked up by my parents.
Okay.
I go home. The parents are now they're farmers and in the grocery business. My mother had heired from my grandfather a store building there in Kemp. We incidentally still have it. And we lost our renter, and they were in the grocery business as well. So I entered into the grocery business.
What brought you and Mary Kate to Grand Prairie, Texas?
Shortly after we were, well, not shortly, and when we married, I was still going to SMU.
All right.
I started going to SMU before the GI Bill. I worked all night out at Lockheed in Dallas and went to school in the daytime.
All right, and SMU at night?
No, worked at night, SMU in the daytime.
In the daytime, okay.
And I went through a couple of semesters that way, and I was going with dating my wife quite often, my wife-to-be quite often then. And
Was she in school also?
No, she already had her degree. She was working for the Internal Revenue Service.
All right.
And she was living in
Where did she get her degree?
This women's university in
That used to be CIA, and that's now it's
yes, North Texas.
North Texas Women's University
Yes.
now? All right.
Excuse me a moment. Yes, and she was a certified teacher then, but she had taught, but she chose to work for the Internal Revenue Service.
Where was she living at that time?
In Dallas.
In Dallas?
Yes.
All right.
But would come home to her parents quite often.
And you all married, but what specifically brought you to Grand Prairie, Texas?
Well, upon graduation from SMU, first we were married before I got out of school. We both took a job teaching, and I teaching and coaching in Kemp, Texas.
All right.
We taught there the 1 year, and Mr. Joe Hendricks, who resides in Grand Prairie now,
All right.
and he's retired, was our superintendent, a wonderful fellow. Told us all of us at the end of the school year that due to the drop in scholastics that we were going to lose a teacher the coming school year. Well, I was wanting to go to coaching school out in West Texas, and they couldn't afford to send me. So I went on my own. And I was a little peeved because the district was so poor that they couldn't send me.
Okay.
So while there, I scouted around for a job. And come to find out that Grand Prairie was going to have an opening. One of the fellows was taking a job, the B-team football coach, taking a job someplace else. So I met Tom Pruitt, the head coach, and asked him to consider hiring me for that coaching position. And did. We visited several times. Finally, of course, I had to come and be approved by Superintendent Roberts here in Grand Prairie, who was superintendent at that time. And he approved me. We agreed on salary, but I did not come for salary reasons. In fact, I made less than $100 more here than I was making where I was.
I see.
The pay was very little difference. And working conditions were wonderful with Mr. Hendricks anyway. It wasn't long. Well, I was hired as a social studies teacher and coaching 3 sports.
What school did you teach at?
This
The old 11th grade school
This was the old 11th grade school
on College Street?
on College Street.
All right.
It was since been torn down.
All right. Did Mary Kate come with you to Grand Prairie at that time?
She did, of course.
Was she
came.
teaching?
No, she came and continued her job with Internal Revenue
All
Service.
right.
Now she commuted with Lonnie Blake and some more people who commuted from Grand Prairie to Dallas.
How long did you stay at the 11th grade building until it was raised?
Yes, until this new high school was built in
All right.
1953 during the Christmas holidays.
All right, then where did you go to teach after then? Did you go to Grand Prairie High School to teach and continue on there?
Well, about the time that we moved into the new high school, there was a change of principalship. Mr. Browning Combs was the principal, and then he was replaced by Mr. Combs was elevated to assistant superintendent. So Mr. C.L. Turner took his place as principal.
All right.
Mr. Combs suggested, I guess rather strongly, that Mr. Turner hire me as assistant principal. They had none at that time, but
All
the
right.
business was getting pretty thick at that time
All right.
for workers. So we talked about that, and then eventually I ended up by being interviewed with Mr. Chambers about it. He asked me what my intents were, and I said, well, I had intended to stay with coaching. He said, you intend, in other words, to be a head coach? I said, no, I'm happy having my own boss right where I am. I said, I'm happy with my job, but I'd like to make more money. He says, you never will. He says, you're at the top as an assistant. And he said, if you go into administration, you're at the bottom where you are now. I said, I'll give this administration some more thought.
All right.
So eventually, of course, I told him, oh, I'll accept the job. Now, I don't know whether that's right or wrong. Well, at the time, I know it was right, but here I've given up my job. I have only a bachelor's degree, and I don't have the requirements for the job. I needed a master's degree.
All right. Now that's going to bring us to a focal point.
Yes, ma'am.
You bet.
Sure is.
All right.
So, but I had done some graduate work along with my undergraduate work at SMU already.
All right.
But I needed my 6 hours in a thesis. And I had done a little looking around, hadn't done much work. So I went over and I had minored in history. I loved history. And I talked to the head of the history department, Dr. Gamble. Told him I needed to do a thesis and get my degree, master's degree. I said, I gave up my job as coach, and I have a job if I can get my degree.
All right.
He says, well, what are we going to, what do you want to write about? Before I can answer, he said, well, wait just a minute. Do you want to spend all your time in the library, or you want to be out in the field, out moving around? I said, I don't want to spend all my time in the library. He said, have you thought about writing a history of where you live in Grand Prairie? I said, no. He said, one has not been written on it. He said, you want to think about that? I said, I've already thought about it. You talked me into it.
Good.
And he said, well, he says, time's running pretty short. I said, yes, sir. Sure is.
How long did it take you to do your research on your history, the Marvin Vale history of Grand Prairie, Texas, to do the research and to get it printed? We have about 3 more minutes to talk about this.
I spent off and on 3 or 4 years. But at the very last, the professor was going on a vacation, and I had to wind it up in a hurry. Now, I'm much indebted to Mr. C.L. Turner.
All right.
And my wife, who typed it.
All right.
Mr. Turner helped me to rephrase some of it, and he did a lot of the typing. Mm-hmm. Mr. Turner helped me publish.
All right, now how about other people in Grand Prairie that made contributions to it that helped you with your data? Are there any you would like to mention?
Well, yes. Some are gone now. Mrs. Elizabeth Crabtree was one of the early contributors and got me on the right track of some of the early
All
history.
right. She's an ex-SMU student. That's
Yes.
good.
Ann Allen, one of my faculty members, was a descendant of one of the early Thomas Vernoy family.
Oh, well, wonderful.
She was a daughter of that particular family.
Yes.
Tom Eason, whom I traded with on Main Street, ran a service station, talked with quite a bit. Mr. Hale, Mr. Hall, just quite some number.
Charlie Robertson, all
Yeah,
of the... All
I
of
didn't talk with many of the Robertsons,
Okay.
unfortunately. Time, again, was running so much out on me. I went down to the newspaper place, picked up all the back issues of the newspaper, had them there in my den, and went through every one of them.
All right, now, how many pages do you have in your history
There's
book?
42 pages.
42 pages of history, all of the good stuff about Grand Prairie, Texas, and you put it into book form, and did you sell these, and how many copies were there originally?
I made 500 copies.
500
Yes,
copies.
Yes, I sold them. I'm down to one, and I just got it back day before yesterday.
And this is your last copy of
Yes,
that
ma'am.
wonderful history.
Yes, ma'am. It's my last copy, and I so enjoyed talking with the people that I interviewed. I've only mentioned I know a few, but it would take a little bit too much of a time to thumb through back here and remember all of them that I talked with.
All right, now after you wrote the history, we have about a minute and a half left. After you've written your history, you've gotten your master's, and then where were you sent to through the school system as an administrator after you left your coaching job?
Oh, I stayed 10 years as an assistant. No, I stayed 10 years in Hall at the high school.
All right,
In 1968, I went to Crockett Elementary.
all right,
No, 58, I'm
50.
sorry.
all right,
1958. I left Crockett in 68.
all right,
I served Crockett 10 years, and then I went to Jefferson Junior High School.
all right,
I served there 7 years. And from there, I went to Fannin Elementary, and I served there the last 4 remaining years.
and then you retired.
Yes, ma'am.
And you and Mary Kate really enjoy retirement, and do you have a lake place or anything? In the half minute we have left, I want you to tell us how you've enjoyed living in Grand Prairie, doing our history, and being a good citizen. One half minute.
I just think I'm an awful lucky person. Part of that being the wife who's stood by me even with serious illnesses. that
Would
I've
you
had.
mention your one daughter that you have that we have?
Kay Desire, who lives in Austin. She's a CPA, graduate of TCU.
And her 2 children.
They're the love of our life, Michael Allen and Katie. They're the world's best, of course. And
We're just out of time, and we're going to have to bring you back, Mr. Vail.
I'm
You
so
have
sorry.
so much good stuff to tell us. We want to thank you for being on the show. And
It's
this
been my
is
pleasure.
Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.
Thank you, ma'am. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.